All right, we are live, people.
Here we come. We're coming for you. Better watch out, brother. We're coming. We got our guns and we got our trucks and we got our flags. Dear living coming right at you. Episode 33. And on this episode, we're going to be talking about religion.
Here we go. Finally. We've been thinking about this for a while. But finally, we decided to do it. Just because... I don't know. Why did we hesitate? Because of a controversy?
It's pretty controversial, and we have a lot of listeners that are religious. And again, so this isn't an attack or criticism necessarily on those viewers that are religious or maintain certain beliefs. This is our personal experience, and then also our critical assessment of religious practices. So we just didn't want to, mess up. And not to say we're not going to mess up, because there's still a lot more preparation. This is going to be an ongoing, continual, multi-part topic, as we've mentioned in the past with things like Friends or Love and Romance.
Right.
So this is just part one in
that's
numerous
a good point.
studies and series, with religion being the primary topic.
And, I think inevitably there will be some criticism as well as benefits, advantages of religion. But at least it won't be done in a resentful way, right? I mean, the criticism will be productive. That's what we're aiming for.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I have any resentment, but I definitely have strong negative feelings and opinions and ideas surrounding a lot of religious choices. And maybe some backstory to kind of help people.
Yeah.
We've talked about this before, I believe in episode 7 or 8 when we were talking about the theory of us. We both have backgrounds strongly tied to religious belief, mine being tied to Christianity in various forms, baptism or non-denominational, Baptist, non-denominational, and other various disciplines and sects, I guess you would call them, in the religion. And I was a devout follower and believer for 20-something years. And I mean, people that know me can speak to it, I guess, is probably the easiest way. More than happy to share a lot of my very personal experiences there. But I was somebody that went, and again, people that know me probably know, I'm somebody that goes probably all in when I do something. And I was all into Christianity from the time I was able to even maintain or hold belief. So I'm no stranger to the matter. You want to talk a little bit about your background?
Yeah, mine is very similar as well. That my family was Christian, so I automatically, I didn't have any choice. And that's pretty much the case to most people, right? They're born to a Christian family, and they become automatically, at least up to a certain point, stay as Christian. And I was like that too. And I have that personality too, that I can become entirely passionate. I don't really look anything else when I'm really focused on a thing, fixated on a thing. So Christianity was something like that to me. Even though I was really into Jackie Chan during the same time.
Hey, me too. And Bruce
Lee. I would often
show
up at a church to a service dressed up like Jackie Chan. I've done that many, many times.
That's racist, bro.
Because I love them so much. I guess that's interesting, right? To me, even though I was very religious, I had this, secular interest.
Yeah.
I mean, it was not a lot, but to me, what about you? Like, did you like anything else?
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely some things that were conflicting with my faith and belief, primarily the way my mom viewed those interests. So I liked Yu-Gi-Oh! Playing cards, which had elements of magic, and then Pokemon. It was huge. Everybody loved Pokemon, but it talked about evolution. So there was a lot of those things were banned in my household or heavily regulated at different times. I mean, eventually there was some give as I got older, just because you can't control every aspect. But even so much what I would listen to music-wise or watch movies. There's heavy prejudice against it unless it was Christian. But over time, growing up and maturing, my mom allowed more things for us to become more open and accepting of those things.
Yeah.
So I think that was beneficial. But I was also the type of person where I didn't need somebody to tell me this is the wrong thing to do or the right thing to do.
Right.
I had some intuition in that regard, at least how to behave or how I wanted to behave. And it was more of an internal source rather than an external somebody tell me you have to behave this way.
Right.
I've read the Bible through and through. I was very devout, very, prayers, soul winning, going door to door, knocking, witnessing to people, preaching, praying to people on the streets. I packed up and put everything in my car and drove to the International House of Prayer, which seems like a cult now. But I was going to go there for a theology school to be a minister. I felt the call, and I was very passionate and very devout. So I went out there and I drove, and I realized, and it felt wrong. At that time, it didn't dissolve my belief in Christ or God, but I knew even under that paradigm, that faith, that this is the wrong call. I'm doing this, which was for a girl, because that's to me the most important thing has been romantic love, the most reoccurring element. But it led to an eventual complete departure from the faith as I learned more. And I think we talked about this again on episode 7, but I think a lot of our joys with religion was primarily coming from a place that we were the type that want answers. We want to understand why and how things work. And there's a lot of philosophical, inquiries that religious text makes. Granted, they arrive to a very different conclusion than other philosophers, and I would say the impact is much more serious, as we've seen with murders, slavery, and a whole bunch of other things. And not to say that these things wouldn't exist if it wasn't for religion. I believe another belief system would dominate and, spread like wildfire that has the same kind of effects. But because that's not the situation, not the time we live in the Western world, we're going to primarily talk about and discuss, I believe, Christianity.
Largely, yes, just because it's been most dominant force for our societies. The Western world especially, the modern Western world. And therefore, a lot of values of our societies have been associated with the ideas of Christianity. Therefore, it is inevitable to talk more about Christianity than other religions. Of course, we'll attempt to touch on other religions as well when relevant, but don't get mad.
Try to stay cool and calm and collected.
Very sincere Christians, and same as you. I was going to be a priest, go to a university to study theology.
Wow.
And then, to me, there were a lot of conflicts between what I had discovered to be moral, good, and eventually my values, I guess, exceeded my faith, and I had to walk away. And that really happened because of, like you said, our tendency to make inquiries about things that are unknown to me and things that are interesting to look into. And then I was considering actually study philosophy first. I was still religious, but I wanted to study philosophy first and move over to theology. But during the process, I became non-religious. So that's my story in short.
So it's very similar backgrounds. We could talk all day about the ins and outs and our personal anecdotal experiences in religion. And there's a lot of great people. I still have, religious friends, family that are very loving and kind. So this is not, again, a criticism of people that maintain and hold specific beliefs. This is a criticism and an evaluation, if you could say that,
of
beliefs. Because the second somebody tries to identify with something and then enacts it through their living and their lifestyle, it's going to be different than the word, right? I mean, this is the case of anything.
Yeah.
You try to act, it's going to be different than what you're trying to act. Like, this is the part of things getting lost in translation.
Yeah.
So we're not speaking necessarily about anybody in particular today. Many people that hold Christian beliefs and Christ as their Savior have provided great deals of leaps forward to humanity, love in their personal life, and a whole bunch of great things. So if you're one of those people, please don't take it too harshly. Just try to hear maybe the words and the criticisms, and we'll listen to your feedback.
Yeah.
Not that we necessarily want to get into a, for lack of a better word, argument about where we're coming from, but we would love to clarify anything.
Yeah.
We're always trying to refine what we think, right?
Yeah, this medium is naturally unilateral. So if you have any questions about our discussion or comments, just let us know on YouTube or any other platforms. But and I like to say that, I mean, this should be this just free discussion, right? I mean, I don't have a lot of pressure, honestly. Initially, I did because, well, this is very controversial subject, so we should be careful. But at the same time, this is not a discussion for making them look bad, right?
Yeah.
And that's not what I'm trying to do. We're just trying to have this productive discussion about religion and its role and the problems associated with it today. More than anything, I think we're motivated initially because of things are happening today. I mean, more than anything, of course, religion has been one of the most interesting subjects that we've been talking about, but at the same time, because of I forgot what I was saying right before that.
The impact of religion, where you're going to bring up things that's going on laws right now?
Yes, we've been talking about religion a lot, but then we didn't have enough motivation to actually bring into our podcast, even though
we talk about a lot off screen.
Yeah, off screen. But lately, what's been happening, gun shooting and racism and sexism and all that kind of motivated us to talk about it on our
at least
platform.
Broach it. Broach the subject. It's hard because this is such a personal nature for so many people that maintain any type of belief, that it's your ego is going to immediately be flared up by some of the things we're going to say.
Yeah.
You're going to feel challenged, and it's going to feel bad, probably.
Yeah.
But again, just take it in stride, because this is how we learn when our egos are challenged. For us as well. Challenge our egos too, So I guess with that, you had done some research.
Yeah.
Stuff you already know, but you put more pen to paper, I guess, with it. So you want to open up?
Yeah, sure. I wanted to look into all the religions first, because obviously it's hard to prove or find even evidence of the very first religion. It's hard, but we can look into ancient civilizations and look at how those religions have progressed and affected the religion today. That's why it's kind of important to look at it. But anyway, many religions are originally begun as some sort of fertility cult, right? And we're gonna touch on those things briefly later. But if you look at Babylon, Ishtar, the earth goddess, was supreme among other female divinities. And well, this is kind of interesting. The reason I'm bringing it up is that the Great Mother was worshipped under various names, right? Because when Greek colonists in Asia Minor, the west coast of Turkey, they found temples to her, right? And they named her Artemis. So this is the origin of Artemis.
Wow.
The Greek
I didn't realize
goddess
that's
of
the
hunting.
original. Okay.
Yeah. And then they took over the existing cult, basically.
Yeah.
And then what happened was that was the origin of Diana of the Ephesians. Christianity transfigured her into the Virgin Mary.
Wow, very interesting. It's funny. A lot of these. Yeah. So when you speak about the fertility cults and things of that nature, I think the reason we have that understanding is because a lot of the archaeology we've discovered and found, right? Yeah. That's a big part. So there's like archaeological evidence more than just guesswork in regards to fertility cults.
You love the word today. What is going on? Cult.
Yeah, I love cults. I fucking love them, man.
Get out there, spread the good words. But also, it's really interesting to look at around the same time, Egypt and Babylonia. They have very different aspects of a religion because Egyptians were overly preoccupied with death. That's why. So they believe that the souls of the dead are judged by Osiris, their god, based on the manner of their life on earth. Right. That's why they did, created this grand tombs because they believe that they may come back.
Yeah.
Right. So even though Egyptians were really occupied with death, Babylonia was not like that. They had more like a warlike development. So the independent cities fought each other, and in the end, Babylon became supreme. Therefore, their gods became supreme over others, and the main god, the primary god Marduk, who got a position like that later held by Zeus in the Greek pantheon.
Wow.
Right, so you can see that even they're really close and similar civilizations, they have very different, features of religion.
Yeah, I think one important thing to mention here is with the adaptation of all these other gods from cultures. A big part of the reason, from my understanding and my reading, and it's been a while since I've read early civilization and religious studies, but a lot of it was in order to get people to convert or to be okay with regime overturn, is that they had to basically repackage gods or identify and pick them up.
Yes.
Because otherwise, people are not, when you believe something, you're willing to die for it. Like real belief of almost any nature, people are willing to die for. So a lot of this was like adaptation as well.
Yes. So like as the most dominant aspect of development of religion is that it was bound up with the government, right? And then a god or goddesses became associated with the state for political motives. So a king became divine with despotic powers and owned all the land. As a result, the gods also became associated with morality. So morality and law became closer and closer during this development. And then the lawgivers, they were divine because they were king and lawgivers were basically receiving this code of conduct, morality. Therefore, a breach of this law becomes impurity. Yeah. So you can see this kind of why religion was, or at least we can say that the purpose of a religion at the time and how they utilized religion. At least we can say that whether or not the gods were real, at least we can say that the states really utilized the concept of religion for their political motives.
Exactly, and it's really difficult to segregate out and decide which of these people, these political figures, actually were true believers or are using it merely as a tool for control.
Yeah.
Because that varies from time period, and you could make the claim you can never really know if somebody's actually truly in good faith maintaining these beliefs or these ideas, and then circulating them to the people or enforcing them via law or otherwise, or even social conduct, social standard.
Yeah. And also since we're going to talk about Christianity as well, obviously this could be controversial depending on who is listening to this. But this is based on based on a lot of books that I read. One of them is the history of Western philosophy, and the other one is the one that I'm reading right now about archaeology. Based on, it's basically writing the narrative again about humanity the origin of humanity, whether or not we're egalitarian, what actually went wrong so that our societies became non-egalitarian. But if you look at from the beginning, have you heard of Bacchus? Bacchism?
I actually haven't, no.
So basically, it is equivalent to Dionysus.
Bacchus, like god of wine.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Thracians were regarded as barbarians by the Greeks.
Yeah.
But they had fertility cults, and a god who promoted it. His name was Bacchus.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a Thracian god. But when they found how to make beer, they thought intoxication divine and attributed to him. And later they came to know the vine, and they thought even better of him. So eventually his role of promoting fertility becomes less significant than the grape and the divine drunkenness by wine. Why am I talking about Bacchism? Well, because Bacchism, in short, was reformed by Orphism, and Orphism was reformed by Pythagoras, and then his ideas affected that of Plato, and later pretty much any philosophy in any degree religious was affected by Plato and Pythagoras, and going back that way.
Pythagoras had a cult, by the way. It's a real thing.
Yeah,
had a legit cult.
Yeah,
think about that. The mathematician. Mm-hmm. This is again the other interesting people.
A lot of things are actually a lot of things about him is not clear. Yeah, there was no clear evidence. Even Orpheus of Orphism, his existence is unknown. Yeah, whether or not it was real.
Yeah, it's because a lot of these people. I mean, even look at Socrates. People didn't really believe in writing things down. Mm-hmm. Right, and then also what's been lost to history through the ages is an unfathomable amount of data and knowledge.
Yeah. So the going back to the discussion, so the Greeks adapted Bacchism, but there were some barbaric elements such as tearing animals into small pieces and eating the whole of them raw. So all those barbaric elements were removed by them, and then eventually they replaced this physical intoxication with mental. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how what happened. And then, obviously, like I said, it affected some philosophers, great philosophers, but those who were more scientific. During that time, you could broadly categorize philosophy into two different sections. One, more scientific, the other one more religious.
Yeah. And at this time there was no obviously scientific method or even standards to separate those two. Only looking back do we begin to divide them up, right? Where we're looking at how you define what an element is. Yeah. And basically the way we made up the world, those that made up the world in the belief of God's created things, or the essence of things, elements. Yeah, so it's it means something different than it does now. Right. So retrospectively, that's what it means.
Yeah. So, and then another really important role of intoxication was they thought of intoxication as a way of acquiring a certain knowledge, not obtainable by ordinary means. Right. And this mystical element entered into Greek philosophy with Pythagoras, like I said, who reformed Orphism, and later Plato, but also the idea of enthusiasm. What it meant was at the time was to have the god entered into your body and become one with the god.
Possessed.
Yes, they called it enthusiasm.
Yeah,
and that enthusiasm became, like I said, rather than become one with the god. Later, those Greek who were religious philosophers, they took it as acquiring knowledge. So that was sort of a change going through transforming to Greek thoughts from Thracian's Bacchism.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's quite the drastic change, the way we understand it, right? Hearing that word.
Yeah.
Which is, again, why it's so important to understand when we talk about these things. You kind of have to put yourself in the time period and culture, because these words mean different things.
Right.
You know, the way they're understood, very different.
Yeah. One last thing about Bekism is that, like I said, some barbaric elements were removed, but also there were some Bekic elements that survived, even during the Great Time, which was feminism. Even Pythagoras says women as a sex are more naturally akin to piety. And even Plato's view that some women should be trained to rule he mentions in Republic, Book 5. So this feminism element of Bekism survived even in Greek thoughts.
Wow. Yeah. Isn't it fun? I mean, piety, I guess we'd have to look at the word, what it meant at that time period, but that almost seems a little bit insulting. You know, women are built to be giving up everything for our Lord. you pious? That you're pious? Right. Come on, what? But it is interesting, right? Because that is an early development where before you probably wouldn't categorize women in a specific way, or in that time period where, for lack of a better term, like religion and gods are seen as a positive thing. To say somebody is pious would be complimentary.
Yeah,
I imagine. So I can totally understand that being like a starting point for feminism. Yeah. And feminism, what a weird word, because there's so much negative connotation surrounding it in modern times, especially in the West. It's getting better, but what we mean by feminism is just treatment of women as if they're people. That's what we mean by feminism.
Yeah.
Treat them like a person.
Right. Also, it's important to note that Plato and Pythagoras were exceptions in historical context, right? I mean, the feminist thought was not common. Yeah. Among them.
There was a couple
or dominant view.
Yeah, female philosophers even in Greek times. Grant like not as much notoriety as obviously their male peers, just because of the time period. But even that long ago, there is still probably in some regards further. More fair and humane treatment of women in some ways than there even is today. Impossible without going back and looking. But yeah, let's. So we've kind of built, I think, the foundation of how we've arrived to this place and time without like the nitty gritty details, because modern day Christianity is obviously very different than it was back then. Even if some of the texts have survived via translations and things of that nature. But if we look at the early church, there's actually some, I need to go look and find the documents, but some debate about what should be considered doctrine, what was like good enough to maintain and pass down via scribes when it actually entered Greece. So, I mean, that alone right there kind of, if I was a religious person, that would give me a little suspicion as to, the credibility of the words, if they had to be debated and compete with each other to survive the times. I don't know how powerful a god's words are if they can be changed and altered so consistently by man. That's kind of rough. That's my initial first criticism from the get-go.
Yeah, I mean, we started to talk about this after the Roe overturn, right? Because didn't you say that majority of them are Christian?
Oh yeah, the majority, well, Christian, right? Catholic and Christian. So the majority of the Supreme Court, maintain a belief system that's religious. So I mean, I don't necessarily want to separate. I know Catholicism and Christianity have very differing beliefs, but they share similar identities and root it in ultimately very similar Western religious. But yeah, and that, I think that's affecting everybody's lives in present day U.S. Yeah, there's a minority, I guess you could say, that's being or not even fairly represented, not even represented at all, and that kind of comes at odds with our day-to-day living, because if you don't maintain certain beliefs or a more ethical practice that's in line with that religion, it's very easy to step outside what they consider acceptable, and then you can be condemned as a criminal, a killer, or numerous other things. which in this case would be you're a murderer if you have an abortion, which I find disgustingly offensive to even make that claim. Yeah. But I guess that's for a later episode.
Yeah, we're gonna actually talk about it in a separate episode, right?
Yeah. Maybe we should talk about Nietzsche a bit, because he wrote Thus Spoke Zarathustra, which is a very popular book, one of his seminal works. That and The Gay Science, I think, are probably the two of the biggest. But so the main character in this story is Zarathustra, and I forget the actual origin of his name. This is like a translation, but he's one of the first people credited with the final separation or initial separation of good and evil, saying one is good, one is evil. Like these things predominantly come from a good source. These things predominantly come from an evil source. So in this book, he goes upon the mountain and basically arrives at some type of truth conclusion. He has a spiritual event, I guess is what I would say. He then comes back into town to share it with the people. They think he's a clown, essentially, because there's a festival ongoing at the same time, and he's mistaken as entertainment. But he encourages man to awaken from their slumber, to discard these ideas and these beliefs and these moralities that they have, and to summon in the new dawn, the new man, this Ubermensch, or the Superman. And he makes the claim rather boldly, right? Saying that we need to step out of this belief where we're at and try to explore options that's going to arrive to a better truth or a more evolved truth. So he even ties it back to evolution a bit in that regard. Because at that point in time, right? Darwin's theory was still pretty revolutionary for one of the first times in written recorded history that we're aware of. We have a good alternative to the creation and everything around us, rather than it being a god or gods or a supernatural event. We have something that can explain it in a more scientific terms. Yeah. Right. So it was a pretty big turning point for the world in general.
Yeah. Yeah, and then his criticism, it appears in many different books, right? Does, and it really cultivates in the last book, the 88th book, Antichrist. And his criticism is of not just religion at the time, mainly Christianity by him, but also European morality, because they're closely related, right? Yeah. And then when he declared that God is dead, the famous... his pronouncement, basically he argued that the belief in Christian God has become unbelievable, and everything that was built up on this faith is destined to collapse. And his criticism was not resentful. He was very concerned.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was just about to say. Most people hear that quote and immediately take offense, but he's doing this from a very deeply concerned, worried about humanity. Because sadly, the entire quote is so beautiful, but God is dead is basically how it ends. But basically, who will forgive us? Who's going to do all this stuff? How are we going to continue to live without these rules and these expectations? What's next for man?
He even says that we have, we're left with this long-term restoration of society. And he basically says that somehow in the meantime we have to survive. This society has to stay intact. So he's very very concerned with what was happening, and then the Christian values in the European society. Even at that time period,
to be able to realize things are falling apart, and now we're here.
Yeah, because again, because the Christianity was dominant first, and then European morality was built upon it, and when he says God is dead, what it means is that Christianity can no longer serve as the underpinning for societal conformity and ethical commitments. Thus, the existing framework loses immutability and becomes mortal. That's his idea. Yeah, and then he goes further, that it's more than losing stability, right? Because you can't really justify it, But also what's dangerous is that even damaging, since moralization is attached to our psychology, right? Therefore, removing its effects cannot be done without psychological damage. And that was his another actual criticism of Christianity. And even worse, he says, the damaging part of morality has embedded within us in the form of self-understanding, right? Making it almost impossible for us to even imagine other alternatives for how to live life.
Yeah. So basically, I mean, paraphrasing and summarizing what he's saying is that your identity is entirely constituted upon a belief system where morality, ethical choices, all this stuff is embedded into you. It constitutes your identity. Life and everything and the way you understand the world is entirely built around. I would say it's built wrong, but it's built around this premise and these ideas. Yeah. And that's, I mean, foundationally, we're hurt, we're damaged.
So society becomes baseless.
Yes. Yeah.
That's the biggest concern. And also another feature of Christianity is guilt, the idea of guilt, right? So it requires, which means that it requires internalization, very intense internalization of the feeling of guilt, which results in attaching a negative assessment to the guilty person's sense of self-worth. Yeah. That's another big problem in his criticism, by the way. And the problem here is that there's no real connection of wrongful action to an actual victim, because there's no victim.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Which makes it possible for anybody to be equally entitled to blame the guilty party and any religious or even ideological system to attach guilt to any violation, even without anyone harmed.
Yeah.
That's the problem here.
Yeah.
Anyone that has been harmed.
It's a self-perpetuating mechanism.
Yes. But you have to self-condemn.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the immediately. I mean, in order to even get accepted to, the kingdom of heaven, you have to, at least in Christianity, right?
Yeah.
You have to acknowledge you're a sinner.
Yeah.
First and foremost. And that Christ died for your sins. That obviously immediately makes you guilty. How would you not feel guilty for putting the Son of God to death? Of course you're going to feel guilt if that's true. And it's entirely your belief is dependent upon this singular, strong guilt.
Yeah.
That you are destined for hell because you are wrong. You're sinful. You're obviously from the get-go corrupted, broken.
Yeah.
Like from the ground up, they're telling you you're nothing. But we can mold you into something worthwhile. And I find any system that does that, any system, doesn't matter if it's the military, doesn't matter if it's the government, doesn't matter if it's a civil rights group, any group that tells you you're nothing without them, or they're going to rebuild you up, you should have a little fucking hesitation about it. Maybe there's some benefits you can gain from doing that, but look at what you're potentially trading off and selling.
Yeah.
And that's the cancerous thing about Christianity, is that it is perverse in the sense that it's invaded every aspect of your life.
Yes. So
your thoughts.
That's what he lastly criticized. I mean, not lastly as in like the last of everything. I haven't touched on everything, but the important ones. But one last important one that he criticizes is that a morality of compassion, because it focuses on the problem of suffering. He didn't necessarily criticize the idea of suffering. He agrees some of the views by Schopenhauer on suffering, but what he really focuses on here is the problem of suffering. He admits that suffering may promote a person's growth, as we know, right? Yeah. But it's assumptive because his conclusion that suffering must be bad comes from the outside, not from inside. And this removes an opportunity for her to assess the value of her suffering. Just removes that opportunity entirely, right? Yeah. And then, moreover, an opportunity to make something positive out of their suffering.
Yeah.
They just the idea of suffering here is just get rid of all this opportunity, the positive opportunity that they can have.
And Nietzsche famously wished his friends, loved ones, hard times. He's like, I want you to have a hell of a life, like difficult times. And he earnestly meant that because he believed.
Yeah, there you go.
That's where you were.
Good point.
That's where you're really built.
Yeah. So he doesn't actually like rejects the idea of suffering at all.
No.
Yeah.
We know. Okay, Nietzsche had a horribly difficult life, rejected, love, had syphilis, right?
Horrible
had
disease.
his work manipulated, misrepresented by his sister for the Third Reich. So he had a horrible fucking run at it. He ended up, I believe, in a I don't know if it was a mental asylum, but it was somewhere where he basically just died out, fizzled out. Right. Horrible experience. But despite that, you read his stuff. I'm telling you, read his stuff. It's so uplifting. Like Thus Spoke Zarathustra specifically. I felt like, oh man, I feel like I'm reading Psalms or Proverbs. The way he speaks and writes, and it's incredibly uplifting and refreshing. And to see it in such a manner that is in juxtaposition with the Psalms or the Proverbs or something biblical, you can totally appreciate where this guy's coming from.
Yeah.
And also, you see, you don't have to look to Christ, you don't have to look to the saints, you don't have to look to these huge martyrs or religious figures and then point and be like, well, look at the lives they led. Here's a guy in total opposition to these beliefs, crushing it, living his life, like making like huge impacts upon the world, and he doesn't maintain the belief system of Christianity, and that's cool.
His father was priest. Yeah.
I mean, he was heavily influenced, right? But it's cool to see that you can look outwardly rather than like he doesn't have to look and point into his work and be like, here's this imaginary guy I made up, and look how good his life is. I imagine if I lived it like that, then it would be good. Right. But rather, it's him, and this is his expressions. He's every character in that book, right? Yeah. Part of him, and he's expressing it. And what a beautiful thing when you don't have to regulate and fit in this box that's been predefined for you.
Yeah. And also, I think the reason he was kind of disgusted, I mean, I'm just guessing by his words and his ideas, but I think he was disgusted by the fact that this ecumenical diminution of suffering really undermines valuable aspects of who we are, who we naturally are. And that was the big, I think that was probably, one of the, like heaviest criticism of Christianity.
Yeah, I mean, he said the two things you should never do. He criticized heavily was drinking and Christianity. And he said the biggest problem with both these things is that the second you decide to believe in the sake of Christianity or drink to intoxication, it solves all your problems. Suddenly, you don't have to worry about any of your current problems because guess what? There's life after this. There's an eternal place where there's no wrong. You'll live in a mansion. Everything will be good. There's only good people there. Don't worry about the problems now. This slave morality, as he commonly called it. The same with drinking. Bad day at work, you're stressed out, your life's not going the way you want. Rather than go exercise or maybe do something that's going to slowly but surely chip away at it, have a drink. Take the pressure off. We all need the pressure off. We do. I'm not denying that. We all want the pressure off to some degree. But when you're just taking the pressure off by giving up who you are and your identity and what you can become, the risk is too huge. So that's why he would say these two things, they solve too many problems, and they do it in a very ingenuine way. That is not a genuine, real type of solution for these things. And again, some people, they have been. I would say those people are like true believers, though. Like people that actually go and take actions. But for the vast majority of people, I think they're just, unfortunately, they're enslaved by this morality and mentality. And again, I'm enslaved by certain things. We're all enslaved. All things are thrust upon us initially upon birth. Like we talk about forever. We're born into the world. Ideas are thrust upon us. We're never thought to confront or fight them until something in our life comes to a head. And then we're forced to either concede that maybe what I thought was right is wrong, or fucking cover our eyes and just keep walking down that path, man. And just, well, you know what? End of my life, there's heaven. I'll see my loved ones. It's all good. I don't have to worry about women's rights or people being mistreated, minorities being treated poor. It's all good, man. God's got it. He's going to fix it. Like, dude, what an insidious and evil set of beliefs to prevent you from actually loving and helping others. I
think that's, to me, like one of the biggest problems of any religion is that I don't see faith as a problem. Faith can be very healthy.
Yeah,
Even
totally.
even if that faith cannot be justified to others, I think it can be very healthy individually. But I want to ask a question: would that faith still exist if the religion was not eschatological or soteriological, right? If the religion really doesn't show you any vision of afterlife, any promise that you will be saved, would that faith still hold true? I think a lot of times it will collapse. I think most people are bought into it because there are promises.
Yeah. Promises that seem too good to be true. You ever heard that saying? Something seems too good to be true. Chances are it is.
Another matter, right? But to me, that's the biggest problem of any religion.
Yeah.
I think the faith should be. I mean, I will just stop right there. But I put out, my idea.
Yeah.
About it.
I think it's one of those things that in reality and in practice is impossible to maintain, and it makes too many gross assumptions. And it's a crude tool. There's a talk that religion initially was just a result or a tool to solve our existential dilemma, right? Existential dread. The understanding that I will pass, I will die. I also think that feeling alone initially, though, was a crude interpretation of reality. Yes, you will experience death, this thing, but as far as, science, matter is still there. Materials, we have all the matter and it's never going to change, period, in the universe, right? We can calculate and figure that out. Energy changes, things like that. Forms change, but matter itself, we have what we have. So I think, again, running into the problem with thinking like, oh, we're going to die was a wrong thing. And I think religion being the solution was also a wrong solution. And again, though, that's the problem. Human psychology is such an early science. There's so much we don't understand. Maybe science came and do the part to explain it well enough so that we can arrive to specific belief systems to help navigate life more effectively. And, caring about people, because these things are important. But yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you, man. Totally agree with you.
Yeah. So we've talked about quite a lot about generic part of religion. Is there anything they want to touch on?
I don't think there's anything specifically in this episode. Probably need more feedback firsthand. But so criticism with the religion, this could be applied to any belief that people say they maintain.
Yeah,
I think most people are idealistic and hold ideals, but if an ideal doesn't serve you or lead to any meaningful action, is it worth maintaining that as a belief or attaching it to your identity? Does it really need to be what constitutes who you are or what your ego says you are? I would argue no, it doesn't. I think it should be discarded immediately. If it doesn't serve you and it doesn't serve others, or, at worst case scenario, which I think is the most common case scenario, it actually hurts you and it hurts others. Rather than digging deeper into it, maybe you should just swallow your pride and try something else for a little. Just try something else. I'm not even saying you have to discard it. Like, maybe just put it on the side and try to figure something else out for a little bit. And you might be surprised and humbled, pleasantly surprised, that there's other ways to live your life. Different ideas. There's different thoughts. And guess what? It's all good, man. I mean, I didn't realize how afraid of living I was until I escaped Christianity. Because I'd been working from the idea that this is the way the world works. This is how it's described. If I behave in a specific way, then I'll be rewarded for it, And I forced myself to be in a box. And I needed to fit in that box. And it hurt. Sometimes you got to cut off some of your limbs to get into that box. Sometimes you got to do some horrible things to fit in that structure. Some deep, horrible pain. And then how convenient that pain is then just praised biblically and praised by others. Your suffering is thought as this beautiful thing. It's fucking cancer, man. It's fucking cancer. I think passion to suffer for something is a beautiful thing, but unless you've arrived to that truth of your own accord, don't get me wrong, you can have help arriving to that truth through experience. But dude, don't sit there and suffer more than you need to needlessly, unless you know 100%, like you're saying, if there's no heaven, there's no afterlife, you would still do it that way. Yeah. Because there are things out that you'll love that much that you'll do anything for. Yeah. It may not be your faith. It may not be your faith. For me, it's like rock climbing. Like no matter what, I would do it for the rest of my life. Yeah. It's not needless, but I don't have to go back and be like, oh yes, I need to go every Sunday to be reassured that this is the right choice. I don't need to do that. You know, how many people go to church just because they need to be told, they need to be continually brainwashed in some way, like, no, this is what you want to do, when maybe it really isn't. Yeah. You know, give yourself some freedom to explore these ideas and concepts. Yeah. And that to me has been the beautiful thing about philosophy. I want to have a deeper understanding, and it opened my eyes to realize there is no one true understanding. There's multiple variations of understanding, and there's so much freedom in realizing, this is my personal truth, that there's no absolute truth. Yeah. You know, there's truth based upon specific circumstances to make that thing true. You know, even mathematically speaking, right? That's only true based on a specific logic or a specific agreement. You know, there's no absolute truth. It's all perspective. It's all relational. So. Right.
That's also a very controversial statement.
It is. I mean, it's extremely controversial.
Patreon only. So.
But nobody can argue it out of it, because I could just be like, okay, well, what if I change the inputs? And then they're like, well, you can't do that. And I'm like, okay, well, if I can't change the inputs, then is that really, like, you know, pure truth? Like,
right. It only really depends on specific situation. That probably deserves an entire episode. Maybe we should do that. But it really depends on how you define absolute, right? Yeah. And also, I think it largely can vary by the definition of absolute. Yeah. But yeah, we can probably talk about it.
Well, I think a big issue within our society is that relative truths aren't even really talked about. We see things like black and white, 0-1 binary.
Yeah, which is manifesting in even, you know, many parts of sectors of society, right? Yeah. Like extremists. I don't understand. I really don't understand. But anyway, let's just wrap it up, I guess. It's time to wrap it up.
Well, this is only part one anyway.
But,
so
I just wanted to put out this idea that, you know, maybe we should, you know, there's an alternative way, in my opinion, you know, that is not fully entirely religious. You know, you can, because there are a lot of beneficial ideas in religions, any religions, I would say, you know, and then you can adapt it in your own way. You know, when, you know, Beckism really, the enthusiasm was to become one with a God. You know, enthusiasm could be, you know, for you, you can replace God with something else, you know, like for you it's rock climbing, you know, something that you're really passionate about, and then you make, you know, connection with that idea on every level. Like that could be your enthusiasm.
Right? I'd say the biggest thing when you're truly enthusiastic about something and really love it for your own personal reasons, you don't go try convincing everybody else to convert to what you believe. Yeah. I don't go murder people if they don't rock climb. That doesn't make sense.
Right. Yeah. And also, another thing that I like to personally mention is that the self-punishment, right? Don't reject who you are. I mean, punishment